And Shannon and Melissa, if you can just do a quick check to make sure you're seeing the event live on your Facebook pages. Good.
And Buffalo's good too. I've got them pulled up.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. My name is Rishu Mahalha. I am the economic advisor working on the program Growth in the Rural Ozarks. This is our monthly business speaker series. This is an event that we have put together to really help our small, mid-sized businesses in the various rural communities where we're working, give them tools, give them access to some great speakers like the ones we have today, and help them connect with ideas, support that they can use to help them in their journey, especially now with in the time of COVID. There's so much going on that's disrupting life as usual that we hope that some of these conversations can be helpful to you. We want to begin by thanking our partners in the various communities. We are live streaming our event today in 4 communities in no particular order. In Buffalo, we have Tanya Watson, who's the chamber leader there. In Aurora, we have Shannon Walker. In Eldon, we have Aaron Rohr. And in Herman, we have Melissa Lensing. And so it's really through these chambers and these chamber leaders that we're able to bring this programming. So if you have any questions today, please feel free to put them up in the various Facebook chat areas. We're monitoring them, and we'll certainly make those questions available to our speakers. And if you want to share and like and promote this to other businesses, business leaders, please do that as well. We would certainly appreciate that. Before we introduce our speakers today, I just want to highlight 1 or 2 items that's also available to you as part of the support. And to the extent that this is helpful, please do utilize it. Real quick, I'll share with you a platform called Business 911. So business911.org. You can visit that to see a variety of support programs that are available to you. Again, just one of many ways in which I'm sure there's a lot of programming and support that's available. If this is helpful to you, please do use it. There's one specific area called Educational Series. And here we are tracking all the conversations that have happened to date. And so if you find it helpful, if you want to refer to any of the past conversations, you can find those here as well. So hopefully that's of help. And finally, want to highlight a new platform that was released just earlier this year called Grow Nucleus. If you want to get an understanding of what's the work that's going on as part of Grow, who are the communities that are working on it, you can see, for example, the various projects that are being worked on in the area of workforce development, economic development, infrastructure development, where are the communities looking for help, volunteer opportunities, local stories. So these are some of the pieces that we have in place. And again, it's a work in process. It was released a few months ago, and we continue to build and work on it. So if you have any thoughts or questions, that may be a great place to start. All right, and one last comment we want to make is we do sincerely appreciate any feedback that you may have. So here you will see a link to a survey document. The link is tinyurl.com/grow-speaker, or you can also just scan using your phone. And any thoughts and feedback that you have on how the speaker series is going, if you have thoughts on other questions other speakers that you think we should be inviting, topics that we should be including, please do let us know. We sincerely value your thoughts and feedback. All right, so without further ado, it's only been, I think, maybe one other time, I believe, where we've had more than one speaker. We promised you one speaker today, but we're getting two for the price of one. So we have today with us Amy Bartels and also Amber Allen, who are with us from University of Missouri Extension. And these two individuals are just amazing, incredible amount of experience that they have attained in an academic context. And also they work across the region, working with communities to figure out what are the issues related to human health, psychological health, connecting the dots between environment, personal, physical, psychological dimensions, spiritual dimensions, to see how to create a healthier, whole individual. So today's conversation is all about where we are in a COVID crisis, we are in an economic crisis, we are in a mental health crisis, a physical crisis. And so having Amber and Amy join us and just share with us what are some ideas and concepts and thoughts that business owners should be thinking about, hopefully is helpful to you. Just to give you some of the credentials, Amy holds a BS in Human Environmental Science and a Master's in Educational and Counseling Psychology from both of those from University of Missouri. And Amber Allen, she has her BS in Child and Family Development with an emphasis in Family Studies from Missouri State University, and her Master's in Nonprofit and Civic Leadership from Drury University. So we're just so fortunate. Amy, thank you, and Amber, thank you for your time. We are very, very fortunate to having you guys join us. So without further ado, I will stop sharing my screen, and you guys can share yours. And with that, I will turn the baton over to you. If anyone has questions, please put them up in the chat rooms, and we will pepper them to our speakers as we go through. Thank you. Welcome, Amy. Welcome, Amber.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. So I want to give a little bit of context real quickly, and thank you. Gosh, I'm going to use that probably, Rashu, for my elevator pitch. That was fantastic. But I want to give a little bit of context. So I'm actually located in Camden County. So there are lots of you maybe on this call that I see. I'm very near to Miller County, and the Eldon area is near and dear to my heart as well. I cover 9 counties, kind of, if you think about Missouri, sort of that south central, all the way down to the border. And again, we're going to be coming at you today from a human development perspective. So Amber, if you want to just kind of share a little bit about where you're located, that would be helpful.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Amber Allen, and I am located in the Greene County MU Extension Office as a Human Development Specialist and cover 10 counties in the southwest corner of the state. So about south of Greene County and then about everything west of that. But like Amy said, we've done a lot of statewide stuff right now with the pandemic. And so we've gotten to know a little bit of every county right now.
Absolutely. So as we go through today, I want to just encourage you to utilize the chat feature, to utilize any way to kind of communicate with us. So hopefully we'll be talking with you and not just at you as we go along today. And then also kind of as a side note, if there's anything that sparks your interest, anything that you think, oh gosh, MU Extension could probably help me with that. And if you know anything about MU Extension, we do a wide variety of kind of interest areas and topics, all centered around focusing on what a community needs, like Rashu sort of talked about. Missouri.extension.edu is how you can find us online, but just look in your county for the MU Extension office. You might have to reach us by phone right now because some of our offices are closed due to concerns with the pandemic, but we do have an office in every county. That's the unique thing about MU Extension. So we're kind of like, you know, you can always find a health department, you can always find a chamber office, and you can always find MU Extension. So with without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started on our presentation. So we're going to be discussing kind of these following objectives as we go through today. And this might feel a little bit heavy. We're going to give some time for feedback and reflection as we go through, but we are in some heavy times. So here's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. I want you to sort of understand what this means to you as either a small business owner or as a part of the workforce in your community. I want you to understand what survivor guilt and survivor syndrome means. These are kind of some new terms maybe that are rolling around, and maybe you didn't have words for it, but hopefully after we're finished today, you will. I want to, Amber and I are going to help you to understand the process of grief and maybe some signs that you might be seeing either in yourself or in your employees. And I want you to understand how stress really affects your mental health. So you might be going, I'm fine. Just leave me in my tiny corner of the world and don't mess with me and I'm fine. But you know what? We have all these outside influences acting on us, and we do have stress, whether we sort of can name it or not. There's a lot going on in our world right now. And finally, we're going to talk about maybe some of the long-term impacts to workforce retention and how to help you to support your workers as we're sort of navigating this, I put it in quotes, this new normal, right? So,
Yes.
Amber?
And so to talk about that new normal, to give you some background, this presentation really started when we started seeing a new normal unfolding, when our local businesses, local hospitals, and local nonprofits and schools were having to make decisions on how to best structure their workforce for what was coming. And one of the major things we were hearing at that very beginning was downsizing and change. And so that really made us start looking at what is survivor syndrome, what is survivor guilt, how is it affecting those individuals, but how is it affecting the business as a whole? So what survivor syndrome is how we can helps us better understand our workforce and businesses become stronger. When large changes occur, we start to see anxiety and a lack of motivation that accompanies the loss of coworkers or layoff or change. Research has indicated that many employees start polishing their resume and begin a job search when these changes and downsizes start occurring. And these actions help those employees and survivors feel more in control. However, that's not great news for the company. So knowing this as a company of what may be happening behind the scenes due to anxiety and stress is really that first step. And some of the key players may decide they don't want to stay and start waiting for that next bad news to happen. And you might start feeling an environment of mistrust or insecurity or anger. And those are all signs of that survivor syndrome or survivor guilt. And this term was coined by organization psychologists to describe those emotional, psychological, and physical effects of an employee who remain in the midst of a downsizing or change. We're using the word downsizing, but this is something that can also be interchanged with change as well. So reactions to those workforce reductions are going to be individualized. And so in the matter in which a business handles it will really have that long-term effect and health on that business. So researchers and consultants have observed several key behavioral outcomes that are often experienced by survivors. So that syndromes, we talked about that fear, that insecurity, but those organizational outcomes can end up being decreased morale, that reduced motivation. Those really motivated individuals that you saw in your workplace start to kind of become sluggish. Or maybe there's that reduced engagement. People aren't showing up to every meeting. If it's an option, they kind of are like, well, I don't want to be as engaged anymore. And there might be risk avoidance, not only from the individual, but from the company as well. That they're scared that this next risk may have detrimental effects versus in different times they would have taken that risk in hopes of it growing their business. And there might be loss of productivity. This might look like absenteeism of someone not showing up to work, but this also could be a loss of productivity of them being present, but having not being productive while they're there. They have absenteeism even though that they're present in that situation. So as we can see, this can lead to survivor guilt, survivor envy, and these feelings are with us in any recession, but as layoffs are spreading, changes happening, it's starting to increase experience in every type of job field. In one study, the word guilt was the top word used when talking about survivor syndrome, followed by anger and anxiety. So like Amy said, some of this might seem heavy, but this is really to lay that foundation of this could be what you're seeing, but how can we improve it long-term as a business and also for our colleagues' mental health. So with that, we're going to look on the impact on the workforce. So the following are different impacts you may see on the workforce during changes in stressful situations, such as layoffs that we've been talking about. Research shows that there's a reducing commitment and a diminishing productivity can linger for a better part of a year after changes occur. So this isn't going to be something that we can fix necessarily overnight, but we can look at how can we make those baby steps now to have that long-term impact. So you can see that decreased morale, that increased absenteeism, and the other things I've talked about previously on the previous slide. But what I want to look at is those last 3 bullets. You're going to see an increased level of workplace stress. And we got to think about what stress are others seeing at their homes, outside of the office, but also how are new things being delegated due to those changes in structure in the workplace or a loss of a coworker? What type of stress is increasing in the workplace? And remembering those middle management, those supervisors, they're getting greater task focus because they're having to do more with less, whether that's financial, individuals, or just with the changes of maybe how your office looks. Maybe you were very much a connected office in the workplace, and now you're all in different parts of in your homes, and that's making it have to be more task focused versus maybe how the atmosphere of your employment used to be. And then the last one I want to talk about is trauma. We don't talk about that a lot when we're talking about job loss and change. But we need to remember there are 2 types of trauma. There's big T and little T traumas. And a lot of time we focus on those big T traumas that are events that are serious injury, sexual violence, and life-threatening experiences that usually lead to a mental health issue. And some in your workplace will have those big T's. But we also need to know that they could be experiencing little T's or little traumas as well, which are highly distressing events, which we've all encountered at some point this year. But also, little T's can be a job loss, financial change, losing a coworker. Trauma is based on the person and their ability to cope with that trauma. So being aware that trauma could be happening in the workplace and how that's impacting your workload as a whole is something to be aware about when you're working with different businesses and working with individuals in the workplace, because all this impact can have a greater impact on how someone handles stress and what that stress looks like for that individual.
So before we move on, I'm going to ask you, I know we've got some chambers that are on our actual Zoom call with us. I know we have a representative from the hospital. Are you seeing any of this in your areas? And if you're on the call with me, if you want to unmute and chime in, you're welcome to. That decrease in morale, that increase in absenteeism. Just want you to just think about your specific areas. If you're a chamber leader, a chamber director, are you getting calls from businesses that are going, gosh, I don't know what to do, or I can't find anyone to hire, no one wants to come to work? So some of these things, as we're going through and we're giving you kind of the research, I want you to be making this real for you. Think about your areas where you live, because I mean, if you know Missouri, we're different, right? From one side to the other, up and down. So
Amy, I'll jump in. Well,
yeah, please.
And just because I get to speak with many of the chambers and the local businesses, I mean, without a doubt, I think part of the challenge is this conversation is just a difficult conversation. There's well, I'm blanking on the word. There's a stigma. That's it, a stigma, right? Anytime you're talking about mental health, it's just not a conversation that many people feel comfortable talking about. And there's a stigma for the employee, and there's a stigma for the employer. There's a lot of uncertainty in terms of financial viability of local businesses. And I think all of it just gets further exacerbated with, generally running a small business is difficult. That's a very stressful zone. You add to it COVID, you add to it the political climate, and just the various tensions that we're seeing. And I like the word, I think you said, there's sort of micro traumas that, and we really appreciate your feedback, because I think just starting the conversation and to know that it's okay to acknowledge some of that is really powerful. So I would, again, we thank you, because I think this is a really powerful conversation in Missouri. I know this is not something most people feel comfortable talking about. So hopefully this at least gets the conversation started. So again, thank you.
Thank you so much. You're exactly right. And I think one of the ways that we sort of skirt around it, even though we're hitting it head on, is we can talk about it in terms of stress. And that makes people sort of go, oh yeah, they'll, they might scratch their, jaw, or go shake their head and go, yeah, I get that, yeah, stress. But if you talk about mental health, people might go, yeah, I'm going to shy away from that one. But we're going to sort of weave that through this whole conversation today. And if any of you are like me, I'm working from home today, and so I can hear my cat in the background. So I apologize for that. I'm not going to let it cause me any stress. So I want to go through here and let's make some differentiations between a couple of the common types of stress. We know that there are a lot of different types of stress, or you may not have been familiar with that, but there really are a lot of different types. A couple of the common types of stress that you might see in the workplace are these two: acute stress and chronic stress. So let's break those down a little bit. Acute stress is that type of stress that throws you off balance momentarily, right? This is the one that comes on quickly. It's often unexpected. It doesn't last too long, but it requires a response and it shakes you up a little bit. So it might be like an argument with your significant other on the way out the door, or maybe it's a report that you don't feel really adequately prepared for. You're sort of, you received that email that you've got to make some kind of a change in a presentation, whatever that might be. You deal with it, you move on. On the other hand, chronic stress. This is the type of stress that tends to occur on a regular basis, so it's over and over. This is the kind that after a while it leaves you feeling really drained. And if it's not effectively managed, it can lead to burnout. This is because when that stress response is chronically triggered and the body's not brought back to a relaxed state before the next sort of, big wave of stress hits, the body can stay triggered indefinitely. And burnout is the result of that prolonged chronic stress in situations that leave people feeling like they've got a lack of control. So we can think about, certain job conditions. I think about all of our healthcare workers right now, and that stress that they're under. Think about small business owners. I think about anyone that's affiliated with a school district right now, trying to make these big decisions. I think about our governor and our leadership at our state level, even at our federal level. That's chronic stress. It's trying to navigate and make these decisions because we know that there's going to be a lot of other, sort of like that domino effect, a lot of other things and people involved. And so when we think about that high level of demand and sort of that unclear expectation, and couple that together with a high level of risk for those negative consequences when mistakes are made, it's inevitable that we're going to deal with stress. See, stress is our body's natural reaction to any kind of demand, anything that disrupts life as usual. And in small doses, kind of like that acute stress, it can be good. It can help to motivate you. It can help to conquer a fear. It can give you endurance, motivation. But that bad stress, right? And sometimes that is chronic. And a lot of times that's caused by worries. I mean, COVID, you say the word COVID now, or you just say, oh, 2020. And inevitably it puts that heaviness or that weight on people. It's worries about money, jobs, relationships, health, right? And feeling that stress for too long, whether it's several hours, several days, several months, it sets off your body's warning system of physical, emotional, these alarms, right? And our body gives us these alarms. It's kind of like that check engine light on your car. And if you neglect to do anything about those alarms, that's when you have a big malfunction, or you set yourself up to possibly having some sort of long-term health issues. So let's think about what that might look like. I put a couple of slides up here, and if you're not able to see our screen right now, that's okay. You can really just type in, you can go on MU Extension's site and you'll come up with this exact graphic, or you can Google it and you can just say, what are some effects of stress on the body? See, it kind of overlaps. So we've got physical effects, we have behavioral effects, we've got emotional effects, and we've also got relational. So that's sort of how we interact with each other. But when we're thinking about those physical effects, I want you to sort of, wherever you're sitting right now, or if you're driving, or if you've got the earbuds in and you're walking, or whatever you're doing, I want you to think about, what does my body feel like right now? Do I have some tension in my, in my neck, in my shoulders? Am I clenching my teeth? Do I have an upset stomach, right? Some of those existing health conditions can even become more pronounced under times of stress. So you might feel shortness of breath. You might get some sweating or some shaking. So I'll say short-term stress, even though I have presented hundreds of times, I still get just that little bit of, ooh, that little bit of stress right when we're getting ready to present. Zoom, and for a lot of you that are conducting your business this way, adds just another layer there, right? Is my technology going to work? Are my pets in the background going to be an issue? Is the UPS guy going to drive up in the middle of a Facebook Live? Right? So there's a little bit of that stress that happens. And some of you might be able to really relate to that. You might feel like, I'm not comfortable, being on a screen. And so that transitions, or sometimes that plays it out in your emotional side. So irritability, restlessness, maybe even feeling discouraged or hopeless. Sometimes you can feel that sort of panic or that anxiety rising up in you. You might have brain fog, right? Really just not being able to concentrate, or feeling like so scattered. Your thoughts are just jumbled all around. And then you might see that sort of played out in your behaviors. So you might have difficulty sleeping. You might have this inability to relax. You might have some anger issues. You might have some choices that you're making. So increasing your use of self-medicating, whether it's alcohol, drugs, overeating, maybe over binging on Netflix or whatever that might be, right? So your behaviors might be coming out. And sometimes your behaviors are things that you notice, and sometimes they're things that you just sort of can't see. And then relational. So communication difficulties. Maybe you're avoiding others, or you're withdrawing. Maybe you're working way too many hours. I think that is sometimes a temptation for a lot of us. Well, if I just do this a little bit harder, or do this a little bit better, everything will be okay. Or I can check out and go on autopilot and not really have to deal with all of those around me. So I want you to think about that. Are you seeing any of those signs of stress in your life? Any of those warning signs? Any of those check engine lights coming on? And I want you to remember physical, behavioral, emotional, relational, those are kind of all of those parts of us. They don't go, it's not linear, you don't go in order. But you might be all of a sudden going, wow, why did I just scream at my kids this morning? That's not like me. What's going on? All right. Rashid, anything that has popped up in the chat or anything that anybody wants to chime in at this point? We're gonna look at some more signs here.
Sure. Let's see, Melissa, Shannon, any questions that you'd like to raise?
She's answering a lot of them as she goes. I came out of a career in HR and obviously saw a lot of this in the workplace. And let me get my video up here. I think one of the things that we all struggle with, and you alluded to it, was just the stigma around talking about mental health. And me personally, I struggle with just talking about it with other people. I certainly would not be comfortable in talking to my employees about it as a supervisor. So I guess just I would ask that question, what is the best approach for somebody, whether they're a supervisor or whether they're an employee, how do they take that leap and say, this is important for me to share this with my coworkers. This is important for me to share with my supervisors. And how can they much more easily make that decision to do that?
I love that. That is such a great question. So Amber, I'll chime in or I'll give what I think, and then I want you to chime in with some feedback as well. Think about what you need as a person, whether you're a supervisor, whether you're an employee, whether you are the owner of the company, whether you're just like, hey, I'm just the person behind the front desk. Like I don't need to deal with any of this stuff. Think about what you would need. So how validated would you feel if someone just said, hey, I've noticed things are COVID cases are ramping up in our community. Things are seeming kind of stressful. How are you doing? How are you hanging in there? Sometimes just that check-in is all you need. And sometimes, and you need to be prepared, right, to get that answer back where someone just breaks down and says, oh my gosh, no one has asked me how I'm doing. And it's awful, right? And so we'll talk about some of those resources here in a few minutes, but it's just starting. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you got to take off the hat of management or your responsibilities and say person to person. And this is the human development side of things, right? Obviously. And you can tailor that for whatever fits with the person that you're talking to. But, hey, I know they've closed school down and your childcare situation might be sort of up in the air. How are you handling that? Or, hey, I know that you have a parent that's in a care facility and you're not able to see them very often. You doing okay? Because sometimes it's really just bridging that gap between, maybe this is what happens outside of my work and it's not anybody else's business, versus, hey, we're all really just people at the end of the day.
Yes. Go ahead, Amy. Sorry.
I talked over you. Go ahead.
It's okay. Technology. But I think that with that bridging that gap, what Amy's saying is, in a way, we're breaking down the stigmas that a lot of people have regarding mental health of it's not okay to talk about. It's not okay to mention mental health. But by just asking, are you okay? You're breaking that stigma down of it's okay to talk here if you're not okay. We're not saying they have to tell us everything because some people are not comfortable with sharing everything, or maybe they're still going through those processes of those big T's or little T's. But it opens up those doors to say, and Amy's going to talk about the coping mechanisms of, I'm coping with something, and kind of helping guide them to those healthier coping mechanisms, or being that supportive. Hey, I'm here if you need to talk. And they might not talk about their mental health issue they're dealing with or the stressor they're dealing with. They might talk about, I know she talked about Netflix that you watched earlier. They might talk about that, or say, can we just go to that coffee shop and have a cup of coffee and kind of just get them out of whatever they're dealing with. And really, we do a lot of programming, including this one, just to talk about mental health, to make it unstigmatized. I don't know if that's a word, but destigmatize the stigma of mental health, because the first step to destigmatizing is having the conversation of what is mental health. It's not, I think a lot of times we get scared that we're just going to have to hand them a brochure or talk about just the intervention side, but we can talk about that prevention side and start decreasing that stigma in our communities and within our workplace to really make it a safe place for all to talk about stress and mental health. And before I go on my soapbox, I'm going to give it back to Amy.
And that's absolutely the point I think Amber and I both want to drive home, is that you don't have to be a trained professional. Now, there is absolutely a time and place for professional help, but you don't have to be a trained professional just to start that conversation with someone. So that segues really nicely into this next slide. And when we talk about healthy versus unhealthy coping, different coping mechanisms that people do, these are some ways that you might notice something either in yourself or in someone close to you. So maybe it's someone that you work with, maybe it's an employee, maybe this is someone in your own home. I would also encourage you to be aware of those friends and family, relatives even, that you're not seeing as often, and just checking in to kind of see where they're at in light of everything that's been going on over the last 8 months. Because unhealthy could be isolating. Now, I know that we have to, at times, quarantine or even isolate if we've been exposed or if we're dealing with an active case of the virus. That's a little bit different than purposefully isolating and saying, I can't deal with anything, I'm shutting myself off from the world. Some other unhealthy coping could be overeating, maybe over shopping, right? So if you have someone that's unreasonably stocking up on toilet paper, and we make jokes about that, but honestly, if there's that fear that's behind it, and it's causing them to really say, I'm very fearful and I'm kind of unhealthily coping right now. Substance use, over or under sleeping, aggression, procrastination. These are all kind of some of those things that you might notice in yourself or in someone else. On the flip side, there are some healthier ways to cope. And there's all kinds of different apps and services and things available. The state of Missouri on their website has put out some really good COVID coping. University of Missouri and University of Missouri Extension has put some COVID coping apps and resources and information out. But I'm going to state a few of those, just kind of things that we all know but sometimes we forget to do. So exercise, taking a walk, right? Deep breathing. So using some of those relaxation techniques, talking with a friend. So a friend, a coworker, just like I said, that check-in. These can be some of those ways that you can help to cope and or help someone else that's kind of maybe struggling. So I want to keep on top of our, for the sake of time. So I'm going to move and next have Amber talk to us about these stages of grief and how they relate.
Yes, so to connect the dots, we talked about that survivor guilt, we've talked about stress, but one thing that can cause stress that really isn't, we don't talk about it because we sometimes don't realize that we can have grief when it comes to change or loss of a job. And one of the natural responses to any type of loss is grief. So Kubler-Ross developed the stages of grief, but she also has developed the stages of change. And individuals go through these stages at their own pace, staying at each stage for a variety of durations. So if you want to think of all the changes your workplace has gone through, and think about yourself, but you can also think about other employees and see that maybe you guys are at different stages within this stages of grief. So the first is denial. And I'm going to use job loss as my example. Is people may not believe the layoff is going to happen, or it's just a rumor, or there's so many or this is just a mistake, or it's not going to be me. So there's this denial that email was just an accidental email. It's sent too early. You know, it's not happening yet. And then that transitions to anger. Then you may recognize the denial can't continue. People may start, moving offices, changes might start occurring. So you might start to get irritated by the very facts that it's happening and become frustrated. People around you might find you getting angry without any apparent reason why. You might ask yourself or people close to you, why me? This isn't fair. How can this be happening to me? I've been here for years. Who can I blame for this? Or why would this happen? And so some of those more unhealthy coping strategies happen during that anger stage. You might say things that you don't necessarily mean out of anger and frustration. And then you move to this third stage, bargaining. And this third stage involves that you hope that maybe you can change the course of direction of what is happening and avoid the cause of the grief. Usually this is when the negotiations take place. Maybe you try to extend or maybe you try to change job titles, or, hey, can I take half of what I'm doing and give it to so-and-so so they don't lose their job? You might say, I'll work harder next time. I'll give anything to be back. You might take up more shifts. You might avoid things that your management used to hate, and you start bargaining with the situation. And then after you've bargained, and remember this happens for any length of time, this might be a day, this might be a week, you go into that depression stage. And soon this leads to depression and the feelings of sadness. Usual thoughts at this time is there's no more meaning to work hard for the organization like this. I heard this one a lot from a lot of different people in this stage. Well, I could be part of the next restructuring. I could be part of the next change. There's nothing to look forward to. My work best friend left. I'd be really tough to find anything right now. There's not a lot of job openings. I feel like giving up, and all those things that might be saying. And what I want to say is during all of these 5 stages, these can be more complex depending on what else is happening in someone's life. Those going back to those big T's and little T's when it comes to stress. And then number 5 is that acceptance. You tell yourself it's going to be okay. There's no point in fighting it anymore. I'm changing my job title, I'm changing jobs, or, the person that I used to tell everything to is not there anymore. And you start preparing for something new. So if you think of a U, you kind of go down the mountain and then you start walking up that mountain again. I know it's an upside down mountain, but you get what I mean. You start walking back up that mountain and preparing for those new possibilities. So what you need to remember about grief is no matter your relationship with a laid off coworker, the relationship with your job, maybe it was just a financial change in your job, you are grieving. And you're going to feel a general sense of sadness, and you might feel guilty that you survived the layoff or the change. You're going to value that missing coworker who may have shared an office space, been in the cubicle next to you, or maybe it's the business that was next door to your business that you used to go visit. Or maybe it was someone who held a key position in your team. Your valued coworker is gone, and that's going to give you a jumbled set of emotions. And know that your grieving is normal, even if it might look different than someone else's. Because there's a term I want us all to look at today, and it's one that we don't commonly talk about, and that's ambiguous loss. And that is a loss that occurs without closure or clear understanding. This kind of loss leaves a person searching for those answers, delays that process of grieving, and often results in unresolved grief. Ambiguous loss is different from ordinary loss in that there is no necessary closure. So give yourself that time to grieve. The emotional trauma of saying goodbye to a long-term coworker is very similar to talking about losing a loved one. So loss is the absence of possession or future possessions, or an absence of a relationship. And remember that grief reflects your culture and religious differences as well, even when it's coming to a coworker's loss as well. And remember, grief depends on what else is going on in your life. Some might be having kids at home, some might be going through other loss of a loved one. So knowing grief can look different. And so some tips on how to process your grief. Give yourself time to adjust. Grief's time is not our time. It might take you days, weeks, and it differs for everyone, even if you have coworkers going through similar situations. And then recognize that your emotions are legitimate. You can be in any one of those 5 stages. And then write about your feelings. It's okay to write down feelings that aren't happy or glad. You can write down, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm feeling disappointed, I'm feeling angry, and really write out your feelings, because writing out your feelings can allow you to see what you're feeling and allow you to talk about how you're actually feeling. And then accept the reality for what it is, that these changes are occurring, that they're happening, and it'll help you be able to process that grief. And other things to consider is think if you have to acknowledge this pain of your loss publicly. Maybe people are going to see it on social media, or maybe you're going to have to tell family members or friends, or you're going to have to interact with some of the same people you used to work with. Being able to identify the name of grief is that first step in that healing process. And accept the ambiguity and give yourself that permission to grieve. And with that, Amy's going to talk about how this connects to your mental health.
We've kind of been talking about that all along. Do we have any comments, any questions, kind of as we sort of get into the last little portion of our presentation? That ambiguous loss is, it's really a term that I think helps a lot of us understand right now in light of COVID, what's going on. You know, you might be feeling a real loss because your favorite restaurant's closed, and that's real. You know, you might be feeling a loss because you can't meet with your Bible study group anymore. You might be feeling a loss because you're sitting in your basement like me and connecting with people just over a screen rather than in person. So, you know, that ambiguous loss, it's ambiguous because you can't really put your finger on it. A lot of times, you know, folks like us will say, oh yeah, but I mean, gosh, I don't have it as bad as such and such. Or, you know, I should count my blessings. I know I've got all this additional family time, right? And so then we start to see that connection with our mental health and our mental wellness. So I think about mental health, and I'll talk about this here on the next slide as well, is our mental health is sort of on this spectrum, right? So we're kind of always in this state of flux between being sort of not doing very well and doing the best, kind of somewhere in between all the time. So there's really been some documented links between high stress and increased risk of mental health issues. And I think that's sort of, we've touched on that a little bit. Rashu kind of talked about that. And then a couple of you chimed in with some of that. You know, I think we're hearing feedback as we continue to do these types of classes and education that people are just feeling disconnected. And that disconnection can lead to sometimes a decline in your mental wellness. Things like depression and anxiety. I have a feeling that we are going to be seeing an increase in incidences of depression and anxiety as we sort of go through this next year or two. So all that's been discussed on all these previous slides can have an impact on the mental health of not only you, but on your company, on your business, on your community. And so like we talked about, having that conversation, knowing what's offered. So knowing what's offered not only in your community, knowing what's offered sort of at our state level, what are some helps and resources that are available? I mentioned kind of those COVID hotlines, those COVID resources that have been put out, but check with your company, check with your organization. You might have some tools available in your HR department. You might have someone that's been newly appointed. Hey, you're now the new person that's going to work on company morale, right? Or you might have had another role and suddenly you're shifted into saying, okay, how do I get this information out to my people, right? So there are a lot of resources. MU Extension has a lot of resources that are specifically designed to help to know sort of how do I navigate. We have, or we will be emailing some of those resources out to you. Your chambers now have those in their hands as well. And so you can get some of that information from them. But here's one that I want you to really pay attention to. And this is the Suicide Prevention Helpline. Now it's not called a hotline because you're not calling to tell on someone, but this is a helpline. This is something that if you are struggling and maybe you need some advice from professionals, you can call this number. And I'm going to give you the number. And if one of you, maybe Rashu, if you would put this number in the chat, that would be helpful as well. It's 1-800-273-8255. It spells out TALK, T-A-L-K. So 1-800-273-8255. And that's a helpline. It's a resource that if you call in Missouri, you're going to be, even though it's a national line, you're going to be connected to someone in Missouri. So someone that knows our state and can say, oh, hey, have you tried such and such? Or why don't you call this person or this organization to give you some help? It also can be a really good kind of a tool in your toolbox, right? To have when you go, gosh, my employee came and just broke down and I didn't know what to do. So it can be somewhere that you can call to get some support and guidance as well. Rashu, do you want to make a comment on that? Okay, I thought I heard somebody. I can't see you all right now.
Yeah, I thank you so much for sharing that, Amy. That's really helpful. I've gone ahead and posted that address on some of the Facebook pages. Thank you. That's really helpful.
Yeah, you bet. Absolutely. So a couple other things as we're kind of wrapping up here that I wanted to go over. It's really important when you're thinking about all of this. So whatever your position is, whether you are an owner or manager of a company, whether you are struggling to try to keep your own small business doors open right now, whether you are feeling like, okay, I'm trying to go to my job and, work with my kids at home, getting their school done, wherever you are in this sort of, disaster that we're calling 2020, it's really important to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And that's not selfish to take care of yourself. You are so much better equipped to be there for the other people in your life that need you when you're taking care of yourself first. So I do have a couple of tips up on the screen. I'm going to quickly go through those. But I also want to encourage you to reach out, right? And so if you're kind of wondering, I don't know really how to do this, again, as MU Extension, we've got classes that are all about taking care of you. In fact, that's the title of the class, Taking Care of You. You can go on our website and type that in and look for classes that are being offered. We're all virtual right now, so no matter where you live, you should be able to access that information. But making sure that you're maintaining some balance in your life. And balance could look like a lot of different things. It might look like spending some time with your pets. It might look like getting a 15-minute nap in the afternoon because that's going to recharge you. It might look like taking up online yoga, or going through the drive-through and getting that, extra whipped cream coffee that you love, right? It might look like seeking some professional help. So sort of know what the things are that recharge you, and be intentional about practicing those as we sort of go through this next year, right? Because here's the thing, you also can help others in this process. So by doing things that reach out and show empathy, empathy is different than sympathy. So we're not necessarily like feeling sorry for somebody else or going, shoo, glad that's not me. But it's going, wow, I may not understand exactly what you're going through, but I see you, you're not invisible, and I'm going to be here if you want to talk. Or I'm right beside you, and how can I help, right? So again, I'll go back to that, just ask. Check in with others, show some transparency. If you are in supervisory position, let people know, hey, it's okay. I, sometimes I'm struggling with some of this stuff as well. Gosh, I don't know what I should believe, but I'm gonna, try to take care of the safety and health of those of you that are in my, workplace, or whatever that might be. Remember that empathy and that leadership, it begins at the top, but empathy and leadership can start with all of you, no matter what or where you're at, sort of in that chain. And remember that people empathize differently, right? And people connect their work to purpose. So helping people to sort of decision make and walk through really what does this look like for me right now? I'm going to go back again because I know that that's top in a lot of people's minds. School is in session and then out of session, and struggling with the childcare issue. So be willing to have some of those conversations with the people that you work with. Figure out what your strategy is, and think about your best practices and maybe how you're going to make that work and work differently. I know that that's sort of one of those catchphrases, but it really makes a lot of sense when you slow down and sort of think through what that looks like. So we are at the end of our formal presentation, but I would love to allow some time for sort of some interaction, especially with those that are on the Zoom with us. Are there some situations that you've seen in your community that maybe, resonated with what we've talked about today?
Shannon, what do you think?
So first and foremost, I want to thank you for providing this information, because it's not talked about, but it's so important for day to day. I also run it's called Lawrence County Prevention Team, and it's to bring awareness to especially our youth with substance and alcohol abuse, which, is growing. It's even growing in our above youth, just because people don't know how to handle everything that's going on. None of us have ever had to deal with this before. And being the chamber director, like Melissa, we take a lot of the negative side of things that are going on, and how can you help me do this, and how can we do that? And there's sometimes where we get to the point where we don't have answers to the questions. So I think it's really important, even if it's a daily, share the 1-800 number, because some people may not take that well when you pass that on to them. But just having it available and knowing that, you know, it's okay, or offering, my big thing is when I get super overwhelmed, I'll just go walk around outside, you know, take a deep breath. Okay, we're recharged now. Let's see what we can tackle next. But I think it's really important for it to be discussed, because again, none of us have ever been through this before. So I just appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, Shannon. I will say that we have some resources. So there are a couple things that we're sending out to you. One of them I want to mention real quickly. One of them is about a program called Echo, Show Me Echo. And you may be familiar with this. If you're not, man, it's such a cool opportunity. So Show Me Echo is a partnership with University of Missouri Health, and it is really connecting rural health providers. And I say health loosely because it can be anybody that is tied in any way to healthcare, including, you know, Head Start, early childhood providers, teachers. There's COVID response. There's there's dermatology. There's a wide variety. But what this does is it provides a networking opportunity, because it can feel so isolating to be the only right health department director in a county, and everyone, or chamber director, and everyone's coming to you for 9,000 answers. And that responsibility can feel really weighty. And so these echoes are really a way, they're no cost. You do have to sign up for them, and I've provided that information. You'll get that in that flyer. But they're really a way to kind of network and say, okay, I have this family in my community, and you know, they have X, Y, and Z going on. And from a social service perspective, maybe I need to know how to connect them. Or maybe it's your, maybe you have one eye doctor in your town, and he's going, okay, I have a patient that has diabetes, and we need to get them to a specialist, but they don't have transportation, you know. So it's a lot of those different kinds of stories. Mm-hmm. And as we know, as rural Missourians, right, sometimes it's a couple of hours to get to connect with someone. And so it's an opportunity for not only your patient, but your provider to kind of connect across the state. So again, I talked a lot about that, but it's just a cool opportunity. It's called Show Me Echo, and you can find that online as well.
Yes, and Amy, I just wanted to add in social workers and school personnel, because there are ones for trauma-informed school and child psych as well. And that's not an exhaustive list me and Amy have gave. Those are just the ones that have came to the forefront that we can think of at the moment.
All kinds of COVID response. Yeah, so.
Okay, well, I'm going to jump in really quick. Amy and Amber, you guys are amazing. It's such a great way to end our business speaker series for 2020. This is the year that we can't wait to put this year behind us. This year has given us all kinds of excitement. And just it was a really wonderful topic. You guys are obviously very passionate about this content. And thank you for all the supporting materials that you've shared for our audience. Obviously, there's some great resources at University of Missouri Extension, programming, classes, templates, and obviously really smart individuals like Amy and Amber who are also there to help you and us. So again, thank you so much. On your screen, you can see the speaker survey feedback form. If you wouldn't mind, just take a minute. It would literally take less than a minute to fill this out. There's, I think, 2 or 3 questions. We would sincerely appreciate your feedback. We're going to take a pause in December with the holidays, and we're going to return back in January, and we're going to have a wonderful lineup of speakers starting in January to kick off 2021. So thank you, everybody. We appreciate you. Be healthy, be safe, and we will talk to you all soon. Take care.